I guess good evening here. We're going to have a little bit of a presentation here. I think we've got more slides than you probably want to see tonight, but it is quite a lengthy project. Warning, the slides do get pretty busy. Some of the print gets pretty small. I think that you folks have screens up here at the front where you're able to follow along on some of the smaller details. And by all means, you can stop me as I go. As you're well familiar, we're in the midst of a fire station project, as we talked about with our CIP planning. And we're at a position of trying to decide on a concept. As you know, we're partners with the different townships. We also have partners with our capital campaign group that is helping us gain revenues. And we're trying to arrive at a concept on essentially answering some big questions of what shape the facility is going to be, what location it's going to be built on, and how it's going to be kind of positioned, and some of those big broad things so that we can take that on to the architect for a refined design. Was there a question that you had, Ken?
Yes, I have a question about this whole document. My question is this being presented to somebody beyond us and the citizens of Platteville? Is this a document to be sent in?
I'm not sure what you mean by sent in, sir.
Well, is it going to go to somebody? Are we just looking at this and this is what you and Ryan Simmons have come up with? What about the other people here that provide information on this as far as the...
That's the whole intent is to give everybody a rundown. We plan on presenting this to yourselves and then off to the different townships and then also to our fundraising folks so that they all have kind of a history presented to them, as well as the different four main concepts and the alternates so that we can judge their preference on what concept that they would like.
That's what I want to find out as to where it's going. If it's just going here and staying, that's it.
The answer to that is no.
Or it's going beyond.
Beyond would be the correct answer, sir. Okay. So the main gist of, can I advance a slide here? I press a button. No, maybe up, down. There we go. Okay. Okay, so again, the main concept and the purpose of this exchange is to get our partners all to kind of gauge their preference on what shape the station will be, where the location that it will be built on, how will it be relatively positioned on that site, consideration for some of the alternate features that are desired for the station, as well as getting an estimate cost point that's acceptable to continue planning. Because again, we're trying to arrive at broad stroke concepts. And so just a thing to kind of keep in mind is that we're trying to almost arrive at a scorecard that's going to have our four options there on top that you see in the two alternates, and wanting to get an understanding of our partners. Do they recommend that option? Do they perhaps support that option, or do they oppose that option? And so the, come on now. We've kind of got the presentation here broke down into 5 main sections that we'll go through. We'll capture a quick background and history, concept development, initial presentation, options for consideration, and then the decision points that are going to be asked of the partners. As a background, as many of you were here at the onset, roughly in the third quarter of 2020, we launched a study with Public Administration Associates and our folks with 5 Bugles Wendell, and kicked off a study assessing our current facility and needs of the department in a timeline that roughly looked like this. When that presentation came back to the City Council, what was discovered with a study on the current station is that we identified the following problems or limitations, if you will. We knew that we had envelope repair, tuck points and sealants and windows and replacements with a facility that's 60 years old. We identified inadequate parking. There is some responder parking. Public parking is mostly on streets, and even responder parking is on streets. Apparatus bay is significantly undersized. Again, we had vehicles parked on the outside. The inside of the station lacks air ventilation, exhaust removal system, etc. There is no room for real types of growth on that parcel. The entryway is not very welcoming to guests as you come in, and you have a stairwell. So there's, if you're have limited mobility, it's a challenge to navigate in the building. There's no vestibule for climate control, as well as the roof leaks. Also, there's limited personal decontamination areas with laundry and showers. There's no gear turnout locker room. And then also we identified that we would also like to see different spaces, like if it would be optimal to have a study space, gender equitable toilets and showers, gender equitable dorms, privacy mother rooms, as well as administrative spaces. In that study, we also identified some of the non-compliance that we have with different code compliant, ADA compliant, as well as identifying that we do have asbestos. And in the places that it's at, it's fine if we don't touch it. But of course, if we do any types of renovations or maneuvering around it, then we have to have an abatement plan in place. So overall, what we assessed on our 60-year-old station is that the positives is that it was in a good location as compared to our fire district and where our responses and our volunteers, et cetera, were. It has a meeting room, which is nice, as well as museum space. But the negatives kind of came to light with safety and lacking modern safety features and space for best practice. Apparatus floor, again, is small, cleaning and decon, office space, turnout gear, public entrance and parking, as well as overnight accommodations. So overall, the study led to a recommendation to begin kind of assessing our possibly a new facility. But as we talked about in this previous slide with the location, the study also showed us a mapping of where our volunteer responders are in relationship to the station. So you'll see there's little tiny itty bitty orange and dots on there that are indicators of where the home residences are of our volunteers responding in to calls. Everything in the blue section is about a 5-minute response. You get out into the yellow sections, you're at a 10 minutes response. And out into the green is a 15-minute response for our volunteers, again, reporting into the station. A study was also done then on the mileage out from the station at its current location. Again, the green is a 1.5 mile response out, and a pink is a 5 mile response out, and everything kind of then beyond that is beyond a 5 mile road distance. Later into the project, we also started to ask the questions then as we considered placement or continued to consider placement of fire station is where are our responses at? And so a recent plot graph that was put together through our partners, the Southwest Regional Planning Commission, who does our GIS work, Chief sent them the addresses of our responses in 2022 to put on an overlay map. And this is kind of an expanded area. It's probably beyond our fire district itself. And this is kind of capturing then mutual aid responses. But you'll see all the little black dots there show where our firefighters reported to calls.
Not necessarily fires. Just
Correct. Yes, very much so. Yes, not necessarily fires, but to responses. The next map that we're going to show then is going to kind of narrow in onto city center, kind of a mapping where a majority of the responses were to. And this map gets very, very, very tiny, but you'll see for folks that are close to it in the bottom right, the ledger down there is showing you the different types of responses with little circles with colors in them, color coordinated to that ledger. So you'll see kind of fire is a yellow and like a gas lake is green, but it's all very, very tiny. Because some of the responses were all condensed in a very tight spot. The GIS map overlay work person also put cigar burns, cigarette burns to kind of show the volume and the concentration of it. So you'll see some spots where it's flared out to like yellow and such, and that's just indicating a volume or a concentration. That's not like a massive fire that happened on the east end of town or something like that. It's just showing the concentration of our spots. And so again, you're seeing a lot of different spots as responses are certainly correlates with people where they're at in the district. And so with all this types of data and the availability of the space that the city had to it at the time of coming out of the study, we evaluated 3 main areas. We evaluated the existing site on East Main and quickly arrived at that it's too small. The 6 bays needed for the current apparatuses does not fit on the existing parcel on the top left there. We then looked at the Armory facility on Water Street, And again, it kind of arrived at this is too small as well. It would need a 3-story solution, and it has challenges with parking as well as stormwater that runs through that area. And then concerns with site safety and on where responder parking would have to be in relationship to where the bays and other elements are. And then the space between Adams and Lewis Street, the O.E. Gray school site, was also evaluated. And this kind of proved to be the most opportunity out of those 3 sites. It has room for growth, but it was also identified as certainly having to account for some slope in that area as the contour runs downhill from the front side of Adams to the north side of Lewis. With this kind of an assessment and this data coming back, the city decided to move forward and begin design, and we brought in Wendell 5 Bugles to kick off a project and follow a timeline that roughly followed this, getting extended a little bit. The end of that kind of pushed into, I believe, like April-ish of 2023, but in hitting these benchmarks. While we were evaluating the different opportunities on the O.E. Gray, one of the first opportunities that was evaluated was a renovation of the existing school there. So the concept was brought forward of, can we reconfigure that, put a bay on it, and make it equal a fire station? Through that exercise, we realized that the school is in fact not meant to be an emergency response building. There was a lot of space, but the space wasn't necessarily in the right spots. Using the hallway configurations existing there also proved a challenge for operational purposes. And so the overall assessment is that it would require significant demolition and reconstruction, and kind of having an etch-a-sketch on O.E. Gray was seen as most preferable. Then a series of multiple different models were explored with a 2-story type of a design concept. They looked initially at trying to capture some of the topography on having ground level entrance off of a basement floor and ground level entrance off of an Adams Street, and looked at different places to position it on the parcel. And there was multiple models that were explored in trying to arrive at a solution on O.E. Gray. At the same time, through the efforts of some amazing folks here at the city and with support from our state and federal legislators and all kinds of folks that helped us with this, as well as partners in town writing letters of support, we were given notification of an appropriation of federal congressionally directed funds of $7 million. And then we also brought in a construction manager, arriving through a bid process through our RFP process, arriving at Kramer Brothers. In bringing in the construction manager, we had a little bit clearer vision of what some of the civil work was going to be in order to accomplish the project. So we had a little bit clear understanding of the engineer, as well as some of the material costs and inflations. And then at this time, we also became aware of a kind of a property line discrepancy as we surveyed the plot. And how that kind of impacted was, if you're familiar with the driveway that goes into O.E. Gray, the fence on that driveway on the west side is edged over and actually encroaches into the existing parcel, because the original alleyway is kind of only the east side of what is Highway 81 there. So we became aware of that small change in expectations, if you will. As many of you were here on the evening of April 20th, we had our schematic design presentation, or our concept design presentation, brought forward from Wendell 5 Bugles and then also the Kramer Brothers. The solution, it fit on the build site. It offered a 7 drive-through bays, decontamination, admin offices, 60-person training room, storage, kitchen, EOC space, and future expansion for a dormitories, essentially a second floor that was shelled. It came at a cost of what was estimated at $15,475,000 based on square footage. And it also had several different features or alternate bids that could be included into it or reduced from it. In taking that design and kind of talking with our folks here on the city end, we asked them to slim down that 2-story schematic to get kind of in a price point down about $3 million. So bringing it from a 15.4 down to a 12.5. And that was based on the assumption of knowing that we had $7 million in appropriations. That put an obligation on the city of borrowing approximately $3 million. It put our town's partners in an obligation of borrowing approximately $1 million. And then that also left about 1.5 million that in dealing with our fundraising partners, they felt that they could potentially raise that much in funds here with local support. But in our efforts of doing that, how this was all kind of slimmed down was really based on square footage reductions to fit a price point. So all the different features and functions of those rooms, of the gear room, the PPE lockers, watch room, et cetera, was all condensed down again to meet a price point. And there's concerns on, well, how much functionality are we going to be losing if we compress those spaces that small? At this time, it was also brought up of, well, is there a way to reduce additional costs, try to save some of the those features of the size of those rooms by bringing it down all into one story? And so not quite a backup and restart, but more of a set of, okay, let's try to figure this out then. We arrived at working with our design team on, can you bring forward 4 main concepts then for our different partners to evaluate? And the 4 main concepts are the 2-story slimmed, which we just kind of addressed in broad strokes, a single-story design that fits on the parcel being OE gray, a single-story design that fits with the acquisition of the adjacent blighted parcels next to it, like an expanded OE gray, and then a concept of a single-story design that can be placed out in the industrial park. And the thought there is that you'll get a bigger sandbox and have less restrictions and less civil work to be able to engage in. So maybe we get more for our money. And then we also asked, though, for the alternate of a basement space and a 7th apparatus bay to be featured as options for all 4 of those basic concept designs. So then in very broad strokes now, you're looking at the first option. This is the first option of your considerations that yourselves and your partners are going to have to decide on, is the 2-story slim design that fits on the parcels. On a broad kind of an assessment of this parcel, you're looking at improvement of bay space in comparison to the existing facilities. It fits on OE Gray site. There's an egress out onto Adams Street. It's east of the corner on Highway 81. It doesn't allow for future occupancy without added on money, because this design and the price point essentially has the 2nd floor shelved and unfinished. So we don't have dormitories to have overnight or long stays or facilitating for full-time responders. The multiple story also includes the need for an elevator and stairwell costs to be in compliance with a public building. And the spaces have been slimmed to meet a cost point. So again, the functionality impacts probably have been underappreciated on what those rooms are going to look like being compressed. We're also potentially having some storage room impacts because it is getting slimmed down. And again, the 2nd floor is not built out. So putting this in a realm of kind of to tee up for a matrix kind of decision, the overall space of this design is at 26.5 thousand square feet, if you will. And that it's reaching about 83.2% of the assessed need of 31,900 that we had in our assessed need at the onset of this with the study. The response to this facility is optimal, as it's still located kind of in the center of our volunteer response, in the center of where we're seeing most of our fire district responses out. Egress is onto Adams Streets. The growth opportunity is limited, but there's some opportunity for growth with consideration again for the slopes and the initial placement of where it goes onto that parcel. So overall, the pros is it fits on the parcel. It has improved circulation over the existing facility for movement throughout the building. It has good separation between the public and private space that allows for public parking and entry off of Adams Street. There's multiple levels, requires an elevator stairs, is kind of seen as a con to this though, because that's going to incur more costs. We have some lost storage space in consideration for our existing building. And again, the reduced rooms, there's potential for some significant kind of impacts on functions. And the 2nd floor with this price point is not built out. So the cost, the base bid on this is $12,482,145. And again, this is a
12 million.
I'm sorry, 12 million. Yes, 12 million. Thank you. It's made out of more than cardboard. So yes, 12,482,145. And then to add the additional features, again, based on square footage, to add that 7th bay for functionality is 398,000 and change. And the added cost of putting a basement underneath it is about 2.6 million. And Chief, these folks have probably listened to my nasal monotone voice for quite a while. Is there any other features that you want to talk about on this first slimmed one to bring it to their attention? Sorry, I didn't mean to make this
Ken has a question.
little bit of.
Ken?
On this page, you talk about the second floor. What do you call in the second floor? The basement?
No, that is a full second story that was designed for the dorms and the day room living space for
But we were
folks to
talking
be
about
on
a single floor.
No, it's a 2-story, right here. It's a 2-story building that has an elevator. So this is one floor. This is the second floor that fits on top, right here. This piece right here.
I'm going back where you talked about a single floor.
those will come up here shortly.
Just a minute. The first option
2-story. Here's
is a
2-story.
2-story. So that's what we're talking about. The first option is a 2-story.
Well, here it says single-story design that fits on the
But
parcel.
that's the second. We're now talking just about this one. So there are 4 concepts. We've just heard concept number 1, the
Okay.
2-story. Now we're going to go to concept number 2.
Yep, we're good.
Okay. And so the second one now is a single story design that fits on the parcel. Again, this fits on the OE parcel. Some of the features and broad.
Advance your slide, please.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, there we go.
But again, if this is a single story, there's also a basement, or you're not talking about it.
No.
That's an added feature that can be in addition to all 4 of these options tonight, Ken, is that you can put a basement under it. It costs about $2.5 million.
So you're going down there, single story, 1, 2, 3.
Right.
You can put a basement underneath, and so that's another floor.
That's a basement.
Yes, essentially a basement would be a underground, lower level, extra floor. Correct. It's not included in any of the base bids. It's an alternate on all of them.
Okay. I just want to be clear what you're talking about.
Okay. So in broad strokes, then the features is this one fits on the parcel. It has egress out of the bays onto Adams Street, like the previous. It allows for future full-time occupancy. In pulling the second floor down, it was thought that, well, it's going to add cost, but let's see what it looks like to build then those dormitories out to allow for potential full-time responder occupancy. The thing is, with the single story design, it has no elevator. So that is a reduction in costs. But you can see that this one snugs up very much against Court Street, and there is no off-street public parking. We do have some off-street responder parking that you'll see coming off of Lewis Street is concept designed right now, but there is no public parking. It would have to be along Court Adams adjoining streets. In putting this on a matrix again, this one's a little bit bigger now. You're at 29,164 square feet, which is getting you to approximately 91.4% of the assessed need. In response, the facility again is an optimal location for volunteer responses in the center of the fire district. Egress is onto Adams Street. Growth opportunity is limited. Growth may likely be an outbuilding or modification to responder parking with consideration for the slope. I think it's probably important to point out too, so in order to, let me back up here, in order to try to reduce costs on civil engineering work, the building is brought up to the south side of this parcel where there's less slope. So the further, if we went back and tried to do different angled driveways, it would result in more retention walls and things of that nature. So in trying to reduce cost, it's edged up here in the front or in the south side of the parcel. So the pros is it does fit on the parcel. The admin is connected to the garage and the washroom, which is seen as a bonus. It does not require an elevator or added stairs in comparison to the previous option. The cons are the parking lot and entry is less than optimal. You're again not going to have off-street parking. The seventh apparatus bay may not fit as an option in this because again, the parcel lines off the east with the adjacent properties are very, very snug. And once civil engineering is kind of actually done and, you know, just dropping a concept picture on there, but actually surveying it out and scoping it all out, it may not fit that seventh bay. The cost of this one comes at $13,391,071. The added bay, again, is the same cost based on the square footage as well as the basement. Okay, so now moving into our third type of design, we have a single story, and this one is showing a fit on an extended OE gray or onto the adjacent parcels. And this would require the adjacent land as the immediate notice of this. The egress, there would be a egress, you'd be sliding into the west, so egress out of those bays would be visualized as coming out right onto Highway 81, which is seen as safety and response improvement in comparison to the previous two. You'll have more visibility of responders again coming out in trucks. It allows for future full-time occupancy because again, this price point is built with the dormitories built out. It is a single story, so in comparison to the double story one, there would be no elevator costs. It allows for off-street parking. As you can see, with it being snugged over, it does allow for some public street parking off of Court Street, and it has additional responder off-street parking as well. Kind of looking at this on a matrix then, you're at a little less square footage than the last one, but you're still at 90.5% of the assessed need. The facility is optimally located in the for volunteer response in the center of the district and has optimal egress out on Highway 81 in comparison to the previous two. The growth opportunity is limited. Growth may likely again be an outbuilding or modification to a responder parking lot with consideration for slopes. The pros is you have safer egress and visibility on Highway 81 in comparison to the previous two. Anticipated space for the seventh bay pending civil. There's room for off-street parking. Like the previous, the admin is connected to the watchroom and support garage. There's additional storage space, living quarters built out, and best operational flow in comparison to the previous one story. The cons requires property acquisition. It has limited growth, future growth with consideration for slope again. And the cost price on this at base bid is estimated at $13,265,980,000 with the same added on costs if we're considering adding that seventh bay or a basement underneath.
Plus land acquisition.
Plus land acquisition and any possible surveying and different works that would go along with evaluating those properties.
Light green, it's kind of a faded color at the far left. That's the potential seventh.
Yes, on the top schematic there. It's showing your apparatus bay with the fleet trucks in there, and what it looks like that the rectangle on the far left is the seventh bay added. That is correct.
Question for Chief Simmons: how essential is the seventh bay? Because I know, well, some of these said
right
might not be able
so
to happen.
6 bays is basically space for everything our apparatus now, with more space in between them, not necessarily loaded by operational functionality, but again, to organize them to fit into those spaces. The seventh bay allows either space where we can have apparatus if it's being serviced because they are stacked. If we're working on one and we can't get the one out behind it, it becomes a problem. So it allows us to have a space to either be servicing on one or adjust the operational flow so that we don't have to still move a apparatus to get the one out behind it that we need. Just because they're pull through doesn't necessarily mean that with 6 bays, we can fully stack everything the way that it needs to operationally respond. So the thing with it is it allows you for all that future expansion. And at $400,000, you'll never build that space for $400,000 again. You know, so I mean, that space becomes more and more expensive and maybe not possible in the future.
Sounds pretty essential.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So now moving into the fourth design, it's taking a single story, the same basic building design that we just looked at for an expanded OE gray, and it's placing it out in the industrial park off of Vision Drive. So you'll see a little bit of a blow up there of what it looks like. A lot of the same building features then kind of remain in place. The main differences then is, of course, you retain the same type of a thing of a single story, so there's no elevator cost. Out in the industrial park, though, you're going to have certainly more space to grow if the building has to grow in east, north, south, and depending on how far from the road it is, a south manner, you're going to have optimal space. The downside, most obviously, becomes the longer distance for the time for responders. Both volunteers coming to the facility and in following the data that we have responding back out to reports or to calls. And the other downside of consideration is that it will utilize development district. We are trying to promote growth out there, and that is less taxable space that is out there. And this is kind of the breakdown then. So you're looking at the same building size, so you're meeting 90.5. As we talked about, the response time adds volunteer response and adds about 70% of our population. It would increase the response time. However, you're going to have optimal room for growth. Pros is you're going to have availability for expansion. The parcel will need less civil work, including there will not be a need for demolition on OE Gray. It has the same features of connecting the watch room to the support garage as well as additional storage. The cons is, as we talked about, the time for response. It does take space from economic development, and it could have potential impacts then on the ISO rating as well as FEMA grants. But the overall cost is coming in significantly with the idea of less civil work at $19,592,475.
12 million.
What did I say?
19.
How did I get 19 out of that? It's a good thing you guys are here. $19,592,475.
Did you just say 19?
He did.
Did I say it again?
You did.
12.5. It'll come in at a little over 12.5.
You don't like that option.
I think you need some water or something.
Oh, sorry. Too many numbers today. 12.6. Okay. And yes, there are many, in talking about the placement on it too, we've had conversations with chiefs. We've talked with 2 different chiefs that gave anecdotally situations of towns that built in their industrial park expecting growth to go out there, and then finding out that in fact the city grew the other way and they're responding out further from city center to a site and coming back. At the same time, I don't have a magic 8 ball, but it appears from our TID efforts, though, that we are in fact trying to promote growth on that side of town closer to our main corridor of commerce and our gateway to our other communities. So there are consideration points there as well. Moving in then now past our 4 major features, we talk about then the alternate bids, and what would we be gaining from the alternate bids? A basement space. We have room for future expansion opportunities and storage. We have future partnership opportunities. We have a potential for shelter space in the realm of disasters and such. With the 7th bay added, as Chief mentioned, it's space for future apparatus needs. It allows for more flexibility in apparatus layouts. And that's kind of in regards to responses. I don't know if Chief, if you want to expand on having the different abilities to put different pieces in different places.
Well, with us covering both city and rural areas, we have to use different types of apparatuses. Rurally, they don't have hydrants to supply water source to them, so we use tenders and we take the water with us, and then there's some other specialty type equipment that you might use, UTVs, brush trucks for off-road type fires and stuff like that. So not everything goes to every type of incident that we have. So as it is now, we have to move vehicles to get to another vehicle that we need to use, because vehicles are basically placed in the current station by how they fit, not by how they should functionally respond. So that's our concern with 6 bays, is we've taken our problem, just spread the problem out to put more space between the trucks, as we haven't, addressed that type of issue.
The graphic, the blue graphic there shows the 6-bay space with the entire fleet kind of in there. And it does fit. And part of it is, in all fairness, 2 of the smaller vehicles could fit in the support garage, right? So there, I mean, there's 2 small vehicles. The tinier triangles could be, or rectangles could be taken out of that square to get a true assessment of what it would look like. So overall then too, with the need for more basement space, again, their future partnerships is we have more and more pressure from state and budget cuts to try to consolidate operations and such that would provide potentially future partnerships with whether it's county or state level types of supports, and have build out space. So then we took this, the concepts to our, a couple different fire chiefs that had recently gone through a build or considering a build or recently built, and asked them to kind of give some feedback on what they thought. A lot of the consistent feedback arrived at some of these talking points of, you know, it's maybe not a matter of if you're going to need 24/7 staffing, but probably a matter so of when you're going to need it, and whether that happens in a 5-year window, 10-year window, 30-year window is yet to be seen. Very, very fortunate for the responders that we have right now. Building flow, it recommended that you build the facility with the understanding that your responders in for voluntary purposes are trying to get to their locker as soon as they can at the shortest possible distance. As well as if you can afford an extra bay, try to do it now. It allows for more training and maintenance. If you can't get enough storage space, it fills up fast. And they also recommended kind of on a more technical level, when you do have storage space, visualize and plan what that shelving is going to look like for that space and how it's going to operate. They recommended the current designs all call for an in-floor heating system. And they recommended with dual doors to keep that in place, because opening up both doors, all the hot air blows out, and then trying to reheat that space with just forced air becomes a problem. So if you can have the cement underneath it warm, it helps heat it quicker. They recommended if you're on the OE Gray site, it would be more optimal to egress onto the Highway 181 would be safer than Adams, as well as then they again said location, follow the responder data, and then safety, consider truck egress in relationship to your responder parking was another point that we had talked on in length. So then we kind of have this scorecard broken out. It's a very busy matrix, but it's trying to take all the very broad talking points and kind of try to build a decision matrix here. And this is what we intend to kind of take out to the townships and again, get their feedback on a slim 2-story, 1-story that fits, a 1-story expanded, and a 1-story industrial park, the sizes, and then the percentage as it relates to the assessed need for size is the second column. Broke it down then to kind of trying to get again, kind of a little bit of a subjective view, or I'm sorry, a subjective view on the public safety and response out, assessing what they look like in comparison with each other, as well as then as a volunteer safety perspective. And then a best guess or a best opinion on growth, availability, and function longevity. And then we have kind of the big hitters on what we thought were the pros and the cons of each model design, and then the laid out estimated bid costs or base costs with the bays and the basements. The decision point then on how it impacts our partners from a borrowing sense, underneath the premise that we have $7 million coming in appropriations and $1.5 million coming in through fundraising, trying to reach a project target of 12.5 puts about $3 million of burden on Platteville and a remaining $1 million on our townships. If we increase that to a $13 million project, then we're at about 3.5 for Platteville, and 1.5. What would that be? Then 1.5 or so, or for the townships, and then we get to a 13.5. Then we're at a $3.8 million borrowing burden for the city. Decision point then on timeline. This is kind of what it looks out. Again, a disclaimer that all the financials are estimates based on square footage of the concept and the best guess of civil work costs at the time. Estimates may change with schematic development and markets at the time of the bidding. But a timeline, if we can continue moving on this, we want to get out to our partners in August and September, get their ideas and bring their ideas back to you with a recommendation in September. We approve a concept design, hopefully in September. We reach then a schematic design phase of about 2 months. Partner presentations at the end of the schematic design. There could be multiple touch points involved with that. If we can arrive then at a schematic, we get into design development of approximately another 2 months. All things working out, then we're going to set our GMP, which is our guaranteed maximum price with our contractor, and then finalize hopefully financing in around May or prior to. Construction documents then go out for 2 months, as well as then a release for our bidding in summer, fall of 2024. And then if all things continue on that track, we have construction start in fall of 2024.